everyone. Namaste. I'm Shruti from Top Rankers Supergrads CAT. In the series of discussing the toughest questions of previous year CAT paper, I'm here to discuss with you one of the toughest RC passage of CAT 2023. The purpose of discussing this passage is not just to give you the glance of how difficult a passage of cat can go, but the purpose is to make you understand that by presence of mind, by using the strategy of selection, and by using a little bit of common sense, you can actually make a little profit out of the toughest things if in case you get stuck in it, or if in case your selection goes wrong. How to deal with a passage if you get stuck into a tough RC. That's the purpose. All right. So let's get started. Now, the first question is, what makes a CAT RC really tough? What makes, what creates that toughness? Like for me, it is the context of the RC. The aspirant is not able to understand exactly what the author wants to say. What's the purpose? What's the point he's making? He is reading two paragraphs, three paragraphs, not clear what exactly is the purpose of the passage. Now, here is a hang. If you're not very clear about what the author wants to say, how will you answer the questions? So that's the problem which you might face. Second is context of the question. You don't understand the question itself because most of the questions are high order thinking questions which expect you to not just comprehend the passage properly, but also understand the logic behind it. Also, there are parallel reasoning questions associated with passages wherein you have to relate the context of the passage with the context of the parallel situations. All right, so this is expecting a little higher from the aspirant. Most of the questions, like if I talk about 16 questions, you can expect as good as 8 to 10 questions which are based on either inferential questions, or it would be a kind of critical reasoning question based on like weakening the author's argument, strengthening the author's argument, what is the paradox intended in the passage, or what is the purpose of the passage in resolving the paradox, or what is the purpose of that example, all right, in the passage. So, inferential questions. Most of the questions are related to why rather than what. All right, so that makes the passage a little tough. Difference between options, like you have understood the passage, you have understood the question, but now you're stuck between two options. You've eliminated four out of four, you've eliminated two options, and now you're stuck between two. You're not able to make out what is the difference, which is the correct one and which is not. Okay, that's one situation. Next situation and next level of difficulty, which CAT will throw at you and ZAT will throw at you, is that out of four options, you feel three are correct because they are correct. That means they are true. Three options are true, only one is false. But not all true options are correct answers. You have to understand out of these three true options, which one is correctly answering the question, or which one is actually catching the inference of the passage. What is the intent of the author? Which one is capturing that to answer the question? So that makes the options a close shave. And that is a struggle. All right. And you don't have time for that struggle while you're taking CAT. It creates a lot of panic. All right. So I feel what makes a CAT RC tough is different strokes for different folks. That means each reading comprehension is in itself a different level of challenge. There could be a passage which is easy, it could be easy passage. That means passage is very familiar, you are able to understand and comprehend the passage, but it could have difficult questions. It could have all four questions, which are assumption based, reasoning based, strengthening, weakening the author's argument, paradox resolve. It could be that questions are really challenging. It could be that the RC is difficult, but the questions are doable. So you feel that, okay, out of those questions, I feel that questions are pretty direct, talking about example, talking about, some reference or line which is quoted, all right, the sentence which is quoted, and what is the purpose of that sentence. So these are doable questions in CAT, and we generally prefer doing those questions because they take less time. But then what about RC? If the RC is really complicated, it has long, complex sentences, you're not able to understand that. That's the level, that's the challenge. It could be difficult RC, or I would say moderate difficulty, not very difficult RC, but questions are out of your comprehension. Maybe they are a next level of challenge. It goes bouncer. You're not able to understand what the question is saying. Which of the following or one of the following, if false, is not in accordance except. So now there are three negatives. So what is the context of the question? You're not able to understand कि मेरे को false निकालना है कि मुझे true निकालना है कि मुझे align करना है या नहीं करना है. God only knows. So that may, add on to the complexity of the passage. And that is the reason why CAT RCs are considered to be a little tougher side on the level of difficulty. So let's start and let's discuss a passage from CAT 2023, and you'll understand as to how to deal with that kind of a passage in case you get stuck. I'm not asking you to choose these kind of passages and get stuck into them. I'm just saying that in case your selection strategy doesn't go well on that day and you tend to select an RC which is tough, how would you deal with it? All right. So this is an passage from CAT 2023 slot 1. As per like my way of selecting the questions, RCs, I don't select RCs, I select questions. So when I browse through the passage, the question says, the author mentions Tanzania's Hadza community to illustrate. So in the passage, there should be a mention of this community, and you have to understand what is the purpose of this example or this community. Why has the author mentioned this community? So it's pretty doable question. Author of the passage mentions Galbraith's affluent society too. So again, this is a kind of doable question because it is giving you direct reference from the passage, that what is the purpose of author giving you reference of this book, because it is written in inverted commas and this is the author. All right, so what's the purpose of mentioning this book? The author of the passage criticizes Salin's essay for its. So again, it is giving you a reference, a very clear reference that the author is criticizing Salin. So somewhere the author might be writing about the criticism, or he might have started with the criticism, or he might have ended with that criticism. So wherever you find author criticizing this author's essay, all right, Salin's essay, you have to slow down and understand the context. So three questions are quite doable because they are giving you direct reference. All right. Next is, we can infer that Salin's main goal in writing his essay. So Salin's main goal in writing his essay was. So what's the main purpose or main central idea of the Salin's essay? Okay, so what's the main idea? All right. So quite doable question. So obviously a person would feel tempted to choose this passage. All right. So that's the first level of trap, that the questions seem to be doable, but you feel that, okay, they are not that easy. All right. So by the questions, you feel that, okay, I can do this passage. Now let's go to the passage. I'll give you a little time for reading, all right? And obviously, if you need more time, you need to pause the video and then read it. All right. Go through the passage and then we'll discuss the questions. I have changed the page. Okay, so let's move on to discussion of questions. And with every question, we'll have a discussion on the passage itself. All right. Uh, my reading of the entire passage, explaining it to you in detail, would actually kill, that suspense of the questions because then everything will be in front of you in detail. So let's face that challenge, okay, which you will face while you are taking the CAT. All right. Don't worry, I'll explain everything in detail. All right. So the first question, go ahead and solve it. The author mentions Tanzania's Hadza community to illustrate. So, what's the purpose of the author mentioning this community? Okay, so let's go back to the passage where he has mentioned it. Here it is. Moreover, foragers had other options. The contemporary Hadza of Tanzania, who had long been surrounded by farmers, knew they had an alternative and rejected them. To silence, this showed that foragers are not simply examples of human diversity or victimhood, but something more profound. Profound is deep. They demonstrated that societies make real choices. Culture, a way of living oriented around a distinctive set of values. That means culture manifests a fundamental principle of collective self determination. So, this is the purpose of mentioning this community. Uh, by the way, who are foragers? It is mentioned over here. They are the hunter gatherers. Okay, बंजारा बंजारा ट्राइब्स होती हैं जो भटकती हैं इधर से उधर एक जगह स्थिर नहीं रहती हैं उनको हम बोलते हैं हंटर गैदरर्स दे आर कॉल्ड फॉरेजर्स ओके So, what is the purpose of author mentioning this forager tribe, Hasda of Tanzania? He doesn't want to show you that they are example of human diversity or victimhood or something like that. What's the purpose according to the author? He wants to show that societies make real choices. It's the choice of the society that which creates their culture. And that's what he wants to prove, that culture manifests a fundamental principle of collective self determination. So, whatever is the face of that society, the reputation of that society, the culture of that society, that has been developed by the choices it makes. All right, it's that what he wants to prove. Now, let's move to the question. Let's read the options now. It says, uh, to illustrate that, forager communities' lifestyles derived not from ignorance, not from ignorance, but about alternatives. I'm sorry, lifestyle derived not from ignorance about alternatives, but from their own choice. So, very close to the author's option or author's context. Option B, how two vastly different ways of living and working were able to coexist in proximity for centuries. So that's something which the author has already discounted you for, that it is not the purpose. I'm not here to show you the diversity and the way they are living. That's not my purpose. How pre-agrarian societies did not hamper the emergence of more advanced agrarian practices in contiguous communities. So, obviously, he's not talking about agrarian societies and pre agrarian societies. That's not the purpose. He's just making a comparison that the foragers lived with the farmers, but they were not getting influenced by them. They were not getting swayed by them. They had their own choice that they don't want to become farmers. They don't want to become gatherers. They don't want, I'm sorry, they wanted to continue as gatherers rather than becoming farmers. They don't want to settle down. All right. So that was a choice which they made. So it's not about the comparison. That hunter-gatherer communities subsistence level techniques equip them to survive well into contemporary times. So obviously, this is not at all talked about that they how they are surviving in the contemporary society. The purpose was very clear that look at those hunter-gatherer communities, the Hadza of Tanzania. They had this choice of becoming farmers, but they resisted it. They took an alternative, or they took that real choice, and that had made their culture of for ages. All right. So he is very clear that the community's lifestyle is derived not from the ignorance about alternatives, they have awareness about it, but they had made a purposeful choice. All right. The author of the passage mentions Galbraith's affluent society too. What is the purpose of the author for mentioning this book? So here it is. With its nod toward affluent society, 1958, economist John Kenneth Galbraith's famously skeptical portrait of America's post-war prosperity and inequality, and dripping with new left contempt for consumerism, the original affluent society brought this critical perspective to bear on the contemporary world. Wow. So it's a complex sentence, it's a long sentence, and it has too much of it to be comprehended. So, my strategy again, I break down it into pieces to understand what exactly the author wants to say. So, he wants to say that with its titles nod towards this book, nod is agreement, alignment. Okay, we nod, isn't it? So हामी भर रहे हैं या हम agree कर रहे हैं. तो agree, obviously the titles are agreeing with each other, the affluent society, the original affluent society. So the titles are agreeing with each other. That's what he wants to say. So, with its title Not Towards Affluent Society, economist John Kenneth Galbraith's famously skeptical portrait of America's post war prosperity and inequality. So, this author of this book, which was the original book, the previous book, all right, his skepticism is portrayed, or he is not very much in agreement with America's affluent societies or their prosperity and the kind of inequality that spread after the war. So, this author is skeptical about America's progress, all right? And Sanil's original affluent society brought this critical perspective, this crucial, very, very important perspective of Galbraith's to bear on the contemporary world. So, what was the purpose of Salins in his book? He portrayed the same kind of dissatisfaction which was presented by Galbraith in his book. That means both the authors are actually doing the same thing. The Galbraith in his book has showed his skepticism towards American society and progressive progress that they have made. The same skepticism is followed by Salin in his book, The Original Affluent Society, wherein he is uh, taking this critical perspective to the contemporary society. All right. So it did so through the classic anthropological move of showing that radical alternatives to the reader's lives really exist. If the capitalist world seeks wealth through ever greater material production to meet infinitely expansive desires, foraging societies follow the Zen road to affluence, not by getting more, but by wanting less. So, this is the contrast of the capitalist society and the forager society. The capitalist society are always greedy, they always want more, all right? They seek wealth through ever greater material production. It is unending. Their greed is unending. They would always want more. All right. So that's the affluence which the capitalist society of America have. And that is in contrast with the hunter gatherers or the forager society who follow the Zen road to affluence. Affluence का मतलब क्या होता है? रईसी. All right. That you have wealth. Now, what kind of affluence, what kind of good life you have? Because you do not have too many desires. So whatever you have is good for your survival. So that is the Zen road to affluence, not by getting more, but by wanting less. So that's the stark contrast which has been mentioned here. If it seems that foragers have been left behind by progress, this is due only to ethnocentric self-congratulation of the West. What do you mean by this? अगर फोरेजर्स को इस तरह से मेंशन किया जा रहा है बाय द एंथ्रोपोलॉजिस्ट दैट दे आर लेफ्ट बिहाइंड, ऑलराइट, दे आर नॉट वेरी प्रोग्रेसिव, ऑलराइट, left behind by progress, alright, why are they saying that? Because they do not understand their affluence properly, because they always feel that we should congratulate ourselves for the kind of progress which we have made. But that's the wrong concept. That's what the author wants to stress on. That although these economists or the anthropologists feel that foragers have been left behind in the progress of the West, they feel that they are not left behind. It's the choice that they have made. They do not want to enter into that rat race of capitalist economies. All right. Rather than accumulate material goods, these societies are guided by other values like leisure, mobility, and above all, freedom. So these societies of foragers, they do not value material wealth. Above that, they value leisure. Leisure is free time. All right. So leisure, mobility, and above all, freedom. You're not getting stuck to a place. All right. Or you're not getting stuck to a job. You keep on moving. Now let's move to the question. The author of the passage mentions Galbraith's affluent society to contrast materialistic nature of contemporary growth paths with the pacifist content ways of living among the foragers. Document the influence of Galbraith's cynical views on modern consumerism, on Salin's analysis of prehistoric societies. So obviously he has not at all talked about that Galbraith's views are cynical. They are skeptical. Skeptical in the sense of he is doubtful about the real progress which the West society or Western societies have made. It's not cynical. Cynical or skeptical में थोड़ा difference होता है. Cynical is more of sunky. All right. And skeptical is more of reason. With rational, he is doubtful about it. So obviously, cynical is not. Show how Galbraith's theories refute Salin's thesis on the contentment of pre-hunter-gatherer communities. So again, Galbraith's theories do not refute the Salin's thesis. In fact, they are in agreement with each other. Both of the authors, in their title, The Affluent Society and the Original Affluent Society, have kept it that the hunter-gatherer societies live a contented life because they believe in Zen road to affluence. Their values are different from the values of the capitalist society. So it's not refuting it, and hence this is outrightly wrong. So two options you can outrightly eliminate by just reading them. Show how Salin's views complemented Gabriel's criticism of consumerism and inequality of contemporary society. So it is taking all the keywords in hand. So now we are confused between A and D because A and D are close. All right. Both have been mentioned. Now let's make a choice. The author of the passage mentions to contrast the materialistic nature of contemporary growth paths with pacifist content ways of living among the foragers, or to show Salin's views complemented Galbraith's criticism. What is the purpose of the author? Does he want to contrast this, or is his, the purpose is to show the symmetry between the views of these two authors? What's the purpose of the author? So obviously, the purpose of the author is to show that how Salin's views complemented Galbraith's criticism of consumerism and inequality of contemporary society, because he wants to bring that into picture. All right. So what is this? Why is this wrong? This is not wrong, but this is the contrast presented by Galbraith, not by the author. This is not the purpose of the author. That was the purpose of this author. So that's what you have to compare and then make a choice. What is the question really asking you? The question is not about what was the purpose of Galbraith in writing The Affluent Society. The question is, what is the purpose of the author in mentioning that Galbraith's Affluent Society? So author का purpose क्या है? Author का purpose to draw a very clear picture that सालिन ने जो लिखा है वो गैलब्रेथ के साथ में कॉम्प्लीमेंट करता है, उसी बात को आगे लेके जाता है. In both the books, they are agreeing with each other and complementing each other. गैलब्रेथ ने जो लिखा वो उस सोसाइटी, उस समय की सोसाइटी पे है, और सालिन ने जो लिखा वो कॉन्टेम्प्ररी कैपिटलिस्ट वर्ल्ड के साथ में उसको कंपेयर कर रहा है. ऑलराइट, सो द आंसर शुड बी डी. Next question. The author of the passage criticizes Sahalin's essay for its Give it a try, and then I'll show you where you can find the answer. Okay, so where do you find the answer? It is in the last paragraph where he's clearly criticizing the author. Sorry, Salin. Viewed in today's context, of course, not every aspect of the essay has aged well. So आज के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में अगर देखें तो सालिन का essay जो है that has not aged well. That means it is not showing that matured view. It is not like in-depth understanding. It is somewhat, lacking in that. Mature view किसका होता है? Mature view का मतलब a person is able to give you the in-depth analysis of it. So the author feels that Salin का जो essay है आज के context में it has not aged well. While acknowledging the violence of colonialism, racism, and dispossession, it does not thematize them as heavily as we might today. So that's one criticism that the author is making, that the way we thematize or we conceptualize colonialism, racism, and dispossession as violent or as, they are not acceptable. So Sahalin has not done that as heavily as we would do it. All right, it is more superficial rather than getting into the depth of it. Rebuking evolutionary anthropologists for treating present day foragers as left behind by progress, it too can succumb to the temptation to use them as proxies for the Paleolithic. अब ये सेंटेंस अगेन एक कॉम्प्लेक्स सेंटेंस है, समझना पड़ेगा. Rebuking evolutionary anthropologists for treating present day foragers. Rebuke करना मतलब क्या होता है? फटकार लगाना. ठीक है, किसी को क्रिटिसाइज करना, बहुत ही हार्शली क्रिटिसाइज करना, जिसको हम हिंदी में बोलते हैं फटकार लगाना. तो वो किसको, कौन लगा रहा है ये फटकार? ये फटकार लगा रहा है सालिन. Salin is rebuking evolutionary anthropologists for treating present day foragers as left behind by progress. तो सालिन ने अपने ऐसे में एंथ्रोपोलॉजिस्ट को फटकार लगाई है, एंथ्रोपोलॉजिस्ट को रिब्यूक किया है. किस चीज के लिए? फॉर टैगिंग देम एज लेफ्ट बिहाइंड बाय प्रोग्रेस. ऑलराइट, बट बाय डूइंग दिस it too can succumb to the temptation to use them as proxies for the Paleolithic. ऐसे करने के साथ में जो सालिन ऑथर है उसने क्या गड़बड़ कर दिया है? अकॉर्डिंग टू ऑथर, उसने ही अपने आप को इस टेम्पटेशन में धकेल दिया है. कौन सी टेम्पटेशन? टू यूज foragers as proxies for Paleolithic. Paleolithic is the Stone Age man, all right. और proxies का मतलब क्या होता है? Alternatives और रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स, रादर नॉट अल्टरनेटिव्स, रिप्रेजेंटेटिव. तो ऐसा करके एंथ्रोपोलॉजिस्ट को एक तरफ फटकार लगा रहा है ये बोलने के लिए कि दे आर ट्रीटिंग देम एज लेफ्ट बिहाइंड बाय प्रोग्रेस, बट बाय डूइंग सो Stalin himself has actually got into the temptation of using them as representatives of Stone Age. All right. Yet, these characteristics should not distract us from appreciating Salin's effort to show that if we want to conjure new possibilities, we need to learn about actually inhabitable worlds. All right, so that's the conclusion which the author wants to draw. So there are two levels of criticism. One, the author feels that the essays, although are very useful in drawing the picture of the choice of the society, but in today's context, they have not aged well. They do not give a matured view. Why? Because acknowledging violence of colonialism, racism, and disposition, it does not conceptualize or thematize them as heavily as we might do today. दूसरा, in rebuking the anthropologist by Sahalin, he has actually succumbed into temptation of using the foragers as prehistoric or Paleolithic. Okay? So let's move to the question. Outdated values regarding present day foragers versus ancient foraging communities. So present day versus ancient foraging is not at all the purpose. He has outrightly rejected that. Failure to supplement its thesis with robust empirical data. So let's go back. He says, but the point of the essay is not so much empirical validity of the data. The real interest for most readers, after all, is not in foragers either today or in Paleolithic, but rather its conceptual challenge to contemporary economic life and bourgeois individualism. So, robust empirical data is not the purpose because that's not what the author wants to talk about. Critique of anthropologists who disparage the choices of foragers in today's society. So, this could be the answer. Or cursory treatment of the effects of racism and colonialism on society. This could be the answer because the author says it has not aged well. So now we have two answers which are correct. Which one should be the best choice? How to choose? दो तो हमने outrightly reject कर दिए. ठीक है, अब सी को देखो. It is critique of anthropologists who disparage the choices of foragers. So this is done by Salin. He has rebuked the anthropologist. So rebuking the anthropologist is done by Salin and not by the author of the passage. The question is not why Salin has rebuked the anthropologist. All right, the question is why has the author criticized Salin's essay? So the author's criticism lies in D, that he finds it very cursory in context with the present society. Okay, so the answer should be D. Next question. We can infer that Salin's main goal in writing his essay was to. Now, this is main goal or the main idea question. This needs you to understand the entire passage properly. All right. So, rest of the paragraphs we have already read. All right. So, let's see if we can eliminate the options and then we'll move to the passage reading in case it is required. So, what is the main goal? Not of the author, please, not of the author, not of that person, Gabriel, whatever the name be, Galbraith. इन दोनों का पर्पस नहीं पूछा है. The purpose is very clear. What is the purpose of Salin's essay? Or what was the purpose of Salin for writing the essay? So it reads like 50 years after its publication in English in 1972, and just a year since Marshall Salins himself died, we may ask, why did his essay, Original Affluent Society, have such an impact? And how has it fared since? Sahalin's principal argument was simple but counterintuitive. Before being driven into marginal environments by colonial powers, hunter-gatherers or foragers were not engaged in a desperate struggle for meager survival. Quite the contrary, they satisfied their needs with far less work than people in agricultural and industrial societies, leaving them more time to use as they wished. Hunters, he quipped, keep bankers' hours. That means they had limited working time, working regime, and rest of the time they used for leisure activities. They were free, all right? Refusing to maximize, many were more concerned with games of chance than with chances of gain. The so called Neolithic Revolution, rather than improving life, imposed a harsher work regime and set in motion the long history of growing inequality. So, the purpose of writing of Salin was to give this view of the society that the colonial capitalist society, rather than progressing people, had actually imposed harsher work regime and had made people give away their culture, all right, which was even better than their own progress, all right. And he is then giving you the example of foragers or the Hadza of Tanzania to very clearly show that they had much better life. They worked for limited hours and enjoyed their life for leisure, freedom, and they had their own choice, all right. So let's read the options now. It says, highlight the fact that while we started off as a fairly contented egalitarian people, we have progressively degenerated into materialism. So we have progressively degenerated into materialism is correct, because he is giving you that contrast that the progress which these colonial powers are showing in the West is actually self congratulating. It is not very clearly the reality. All right. But highlighting the fact that while we started off as fairly contented, egalitarian people, this is something which is doubtful. Let's keep it right now. I'm not eliminating it. Let's keep it. Put forth the view that despite egalitarian origins, economic progress brings greater inequality and social hierarchies. Now, with B option, it becomes very clear to me. It is starting with despite, के बावजूद, किसके बावजूद? Egalitarian origins के बावजूद. So, what does egalitarian mean? It is in contrast with this. So, this says greater inequality and social hierarchy. Inequality का opposite क्या होता है? Equality. So, what is egalitarian? Equality. Okay, so egalitarian origin, equal origin. So although we started off equally, but we have created these hierarchies. So again, here also started off as fairly contented, egalitarian people. That means we were equal people, but with progress we have degenerated into materialism. So this and this both get cancelled out because we now have understood what is the meaning of egalitarian. It means equal. So nowhere the author has said that we all started equally and then we have created these hierarchies. It is saying that there are societies which do not want to get into that game of chance, all right, and they want to live their happy life with limited working hours and more leisure time. But colonial capitalist societies are forcing them to get into the work regime, which is hard and for their survival. All right. So obviously, it is not. These two are obviously wrong because it's not about that we started with equality and then With economic progress, we have progressed very far and they have been left behind. That's not what the author wants to talk about. Hold a mirror to an acquisitive society with an example of other communities that have chosen successfully to be non-materialistic. Now, which are those other communities? Example of other communities? These are foragers. They are not our community. We are the uh, acquisitive society. What is acquisitive? Acquisition, acquire, greed, isn't it? Want to have more. That is acquisitive. और store करके रख लूं. That is acquisition. All right. So hold a mirror to an acquisitive society. That is the contemporary society, which is very greedy society. Okay. So it is holding a mirror. Holding a mirror मतलब आईना दिखा रहे हैं कि देखो तुम्हारी progress. ठीक है, so that's the actual purpose of the author. He is holding a mirror to the acquisitive society that look at your progress. What progress are you making? You are a slave to your job. You are a slave to your lifestyle. You do not have free time as compared to the other communities, which were the foragers that have chosen successfully to be non materialistic. And what the author wants to say is Zen way to affluence. All right, that you don't want very much, you don't want more, and hence whatever you have is sufficient for your survival. Hence you have much more leisure time. So obviously this seems to be the correct answer, but we have one option again. Do not get into that temptation of marking the answer unless you have read all the four options. D is counter Galbraith's pessimistic view of the inevitability of capitalist trajectory for economic growth. So his purpose is not to counter or compare Galbraith and Salin. Although he is doing that, but he is not doing that to show you that contrast. He is showing you that they are complementing each other. So obviously they do not counter each other, they are complementing each other. And hence D option is also wrong. So the answer should be C. All right, so each and every option has to be evaluated clearly. And there are certain words which you might not understand. Have patience, move on. Do not be judgmental about it very quickly. Do not be in a panic mode. Use your own presence of mind, move ahead, compare options, and then you can get the correct answer. All right. But having said this, my suggestion or the learnings which I want to make you understand, the very first thing, do not get intimidated by the language or the vocabulary. You might at the first go and not understand foragers. What are foragers? I'm not ready. Have patience. The meaning is given over there. All right, it is hunter gatherers or foragers. So you understand that they are hunter gatherers. All right. Similarly, egalitarian. So you don't understand what is egalitarian. Don't panic. The meaning would be understood by the context of the sentence. Have patience. Read more. All right. So there might be chances that there is a passage which you have chosen for answering the questions, and then there are options wherein you do not understand the vocabulary. Do not panic. Understand the word by the context. All right. Look for the big picture and not every detail of the RC. Do not, like many students ask this question, मैम मैं जब तक आखिरी में आती हूँ मैं सब भूल जाता हूँ या भूल जाती हूँ. अरे, it's okay. You're not supposed to memorize anything. It's an open book exam. The passage is in front of you. You don't have to memorize that. You have to just link the idea and identify the big picture. What is the purpose of the author in writing this? Why has the author given this example? And you'll find that most of the CAT questions are actually testing you on that. When you go for higher studies, you are uh, surrounded by so much of information. You have to gather so much of information. You have a plethora of documents and thesis and etc., which you need to browse and then make some presentation out of it. Do you think you need to memorize everything? And is it possible to do that? Humanly, computers can do that, but can you? You don't have that artificial intelligence. You have natural intelligence. Use that. All right. So natural intelligence says that you should be focusing on the big picture rather than getting into every detail. Wherever you have the question associated with a particular example or a particular data, go back to it and refer to it and understand it and answer the question. All right. Analyze in detail the close option. You don't have to get into the details of the RC, but you have to get into the details of the options. Because if you are very hasty, if you are rushing through the options, you might miss the close, difference or contrast or close things which make one option correct and the other option wrong. All right. So don't rush. Have patience. You will be able to eliminate options by comparing the options. All right. And not by rushing through them. Okay. This is the best thing which I can talk about, and that is presence of mind. Again, as I told in the beginning, I repeat, I'm not asking you to purposefully select tough RCs. I am not saying that you should actually, you should not practice selection of questions in VARC. Not saying that. Or whatever they present, you should start solving that. In that case, you will be leaving a lot of cash on the table later on because there are a lot of questions in parajumble, in parasummary, in paracompletion, odd one out, which are very, very easy and you killed your time in solving tough passages, which obviously are not very sure will give you any cash reward. But those easy questions are definitely going to give you cash in hand, isn't it? So I'm not asking you to do that. I'm saying that while taking a mock or while taking the actual CAT, you are selecting passages, you find that the questions are doable, and you've started reading the passage. Now, when you are already halfway through the passage, then I would not want you to get into sunk cost fallacy that, okay, I have devoted this much of time, let me waste another, 5 minutes. Not that. But whatever you are able to read out of that in 1.5 minutes, are you able to solve two questions? Are you able to even solve one question? Is it possible that out of those three or four questions, you're able to make sense out of three questions or two questions, and then move on? All right. So rather than creating that panic, my suggestion is have presence of mind, deal with the situation in a very economic way. ठीक है, बिल्कुल कंजूस की तरह काम करना है कि भाई मैंने टाइम दिया, मेरा टाइम इन्वेस्ट हुआ है ना, लेट मी टेक एटलीस्ट वन क्वेश्चन आउट ऑफ इट, लेट मी ट्राई एटलीस्ट वन. ओके. सो अगेन क्लोज ऑप्शंस है, कंपेयर करके फिर आंसर करना है. ऑल राइट. सो let me end the session now. And before I sign off, I want to remind you that we have a, a very good, test series launched, and I want you to get registered there so that you can take actual CAT paper, actual CAT questions as your mocks. All right. You just have to go to our website, all right, and get registered to CAT and OMETs, or simply go to this test series section and you can register yourself to all-in-one test series batches. So we have compiled and created CAT, actual CAT passages for your mock. Also, we have beautifully curated and toughest levels curated for your mocks. So if you want to join our test series, this is the best use of your time and value for your money. All right. So do keep in touch with us in these YouTube sessions. We'll be coming up with more of these sessions, which will be helping you deal with the toughest situations of CAT. all right, and we'll be discussing them more frequently. So to do that, you need to subscribe to our channel. If you have not done yet, please do that. So until we meet next time, take good care of yourself, take good rest, and prepare well. Bye.